Dum dum da dum dum da da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum 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 da 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 dum 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 da dum dum da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum 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 da 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 dum 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 dum. Hello folks. Well, here it is, the long-awaited result of the Pittsburgh Marathon. Did I finish? Well, you're going to find out if you watch this video. Video here is designed to be fairly comprehensive. We talk about the equipment, we talk about the course, we talk about my thought process, we talk about the weather. There's many topics addressed in this video. So, and anybody that's been following along on our website knows that I've signed up for the Pittsburgh Marathon several times, unable to compete for injury reasons, for thought I was too slow reasons, for various reasons, but this year I actually got there, lined up and ran. So settle in, get some popcorn and your favorite beverage, and here's the full story of the Pittsburgh Marathon and David Lentz's attempts to complete it. Anyway, thanks a lot for visiting. I hope you'll enjoy the video. Thanks. So anyway, I got to Pittsburgh, and anyway, to give you some idea, I always sort of like, every time I think of Pittsburgh and every time I drive downtown and I see the sky, that dramatic skyline of the city of Pittsburgh, it's just the most, it really, if you come through the Fort Pitt Tunnel, it's just, there just is not a more spectacular skyline than there is when you come through this Fort Pitt Tunnel and you see the downtown skyline of the city of Pittsburgh. I might be a little bit biased, but I think if you ever get a chance to do that, you'll see what I mean. But I always hear in the back of my mind that tune, Good Thing by Fine Young Cannibals. So anyway, so we got up there downtown. I got down to downtown. So check-in was at 3 o'clock Saturday, the day before the marathon. Now, I had stressed importance about having like 6 45-mile weeks, and I think I sort of overdid it the previous weekend through Tuesday, 5 days prior to the marathon, completing a 45-mile week, because frankly I was a little bit scared about well, scared, I guess scared is the word, but I was afraid that I'd actually overworked both of my troublesome hamstrings. I always have problems with my hamstrings, sciatica on one side and the hamstring itself on the right side. I thought maybe I'd overdone it. As a matter of fact, the night before the marathon I was downtown, I was walking around trying to find how far my hotel was from the start line. I had luckily, strategically lucked out and got virtually a perfect spot to have a room. Because I had, the starting line was basically for where my quote corral was, and I'll talk about that later. It was only about 3 blocks from my hotel on one side, and on the other side, 3 blocks away was the finish line. It couldn't have been better, really. That was at the Hilton downtown, the Garden Inn, I believe it was. But anyway, so pressing so hard to get to 45 miles in, I may not have pressed so hard to do that if I had to do that again, but everything is very psychological in the marathon business. And so anyway, so I was having some problems with my hamstring. I was very worried about actually even running. I mean, I'm a little bit of a hypochondriac at times, but I was genuinely concerned that I was going to be functional enough from a running perspective to get on the starting line. Also, I had been eating like a horse the week before the marathon because I wasn't working out. So I'm not only am I not expending the calories, I'm taking additional calories in, and I felt heavy. I felt very heavy the morning of the marathon. Total breakdown on my part in terms of discipline. You know, and I think it has to be stressed, and I think I mentioned in the last video that I'd had problems with the weight, and had, you know, car troubles, you know, computer trouble, I was doing a lot of sitting around basically, and dings and slight injuries, you know, and your schedule gets off, and all of a sudden you're not quite running quite as much, and you're eating a little more, and I have gotten up to 198, which put me 7 pounds over my limit. But let me tell you something. I had weighed myself Tuesday morning after the marathon, and my weight was 213. Now I think a lot of that was food still in my system, because as I make this video, I weighed myself today, which is the Saturday following the marathon. This is May the 11th. The marathon was May 5th, and my weight came in at 204.6. But I'm relatively confident that I was a tiny bit more, at least a tiny bit more than 200 for the marathon, and I venture to guess that I was 202 or 203. But I don't know for sure. I was somewhere between 198 and 213, let's put it that way, and my guess is closer to where I am right as I'm sitting here, which is 204.6. So in any event, which would have made me eligible, I guess, for the Clydesdale division, which I did not sign up for. All right, so anyway, so, you know, motion, and I had these problems with the hamstring, so my confidence was shaken for the morning when I lined up. In terms of the equipment, I'm wearing this hat. I actually bought this hat thinking, as you'll recall from the last video, that we were going to have temperatures in the 70s and sunny, and I was very concerned about the sun beating down on me. I ultimately did not utilize this hat, and if there's one little lesson here to be learned in this, when you're in a crisis mentality, and I was in a crisis mentality because of my weight and because of my hamstrings, and because I was fearful that I wasn't going to be able, really, very well to run the marathon, I just started, you know, going back to what I always did, very basic things, doing the things that I always worked for me, just relying more on gut instinct, animal gut instinct, to help with everything else. And I ultimately, if you'll recall, I had attached a handkerchief to this hat. I had pinned it to this hat, and I was going to basically do something like this and put this on the back of my neck because I thought it was going to be sunny, and I'd really cooked a bad sunburn on my neck about 2 weeks ago. And so, but even that, I dispensed the morning of the marathon. I was putting on the clothes I was going to wear. I was going to wear a top that was sort of a blue, sort of like this, but because I didn't think that was going to be heavy enough, because all of a sudden the weather forecast changed and the temperatures were going to be a little bit cooler, it was going to be a little bit rainy, I decided to go to my old tried and true actual, the top that I worked out in the most. It was also, I think, a little bit heavier because I was afraid I was going to be cold down there at the start line. Temperatures in the about 53, 54 down there, you know, at the Three Rivers. I thought it'd be very cold, and I decided to wear my long sleeve dry fit. I sat there literally the morning of the marathon. I got up at 5:20 for a start time of 7. I'm about 3 blocks from where I need to be, so that's not a big issue. And I'm sitting there and I'm trying on different stuff, changing my mind 50,000 times about what I'm going to wear and what I'm going to do. And I ultimately went with my the top that I probably practiced in the most, and I decided to put on the long sleeve dry fit, even though I knew they were calling for the temperatures to get to about 70 but still be overcast instead of sun. So I thought that the dry fit with the long sleeves was probably going to be a little bit too heavy. In fact, I knew it was going to be too heavy, that I would have to take it off at some point, I really didn't want to carry a lot of extra stuff with me, but I didn't want to run the chance of being out on the course, breaking down, stop running, and get cold. You know, I didn't want to do that, so I took it with me, and ultimately I tied the arms around my waist and took it with me. And as we will see, I literally, while we were standing at the start line getting ready to start, I actually took it off, even though it's raining and it's in the mid-50s. I was so pumped up, I didn't, you know, I just took it off. But like you said, my point is you start to resort to your animal instincts, what's worked in the past for you, and all this other fluff is just a bunch of analysis, you know, it's just for people who read books. So, anyway, so let's talk about it. I talked about this. So I did use this hat, and it had this thing, this string that tied around my neck, and that became a pain in the rear end. So because I ended up taking this off and just wearing the hat like I normally do in practice, and then I ended up wrapping this thing around this strap in the back, and because I just wasn't going to use the whole mechanism, and I was just running like I normally ran. In fact, you can still see this here, and there's 1 or 2 videos. This thing that's hanging in front of my face is actually this thing, which was a pain in the butt the whole marathon long. But anyway, I decided to keep it on there for posterity. So anyway, so let's talk about something else. All right, that's the hat. The nabs. I had jelly beans and some trail mix. I estimated I was going to take 2 packages of worth about 500 calories each. You know, to eat probably at the 8 or 10 mile mark to avoid hitting the wall or something like that. I ended up just taking 1 bag and basically a little tiny bit more than half, because when I put everything on that morning of the marathon, with the nabs and with the poncho I was going to take, if you'll recall the poncho, I did, and I put that poncho in my pocket. I was really heavy. I mean, I had put this, I had my cell phone, I had my wallet, I had a package of nabs, I had a package with it had, I'm having a little bit of a tooth problem, that had ibuprofen in it, 5 pills of 200 milligrams, and I took 3 pills of 200 milligrams each of ibuprofen before the race to prevent swelling in my, I was worried about swelling in my sciatica, and also I was having this tooth problem, so I had that, and so I had 5 pills of ibuprofen. What else did I have? Oh yeah, I had some salve for my gum line for my tooth, and oh, a couple allergy pills. That's right. I didn't take any allergy pills before the race, and thank goodness, knock on wood, we didn't run into any allergy problems out there, which could have been a problem, but it wasn't on this particular morning. Let's see. But anyway, I took fewer naps with me, because out there on the race course, I mean, and as slow as I was and as late as I was through all the station, the Pittsburgh race, to their credit, still had, you know, like things like Gatorade and the typical stuff, you know, the electrolyte type products, the energy type, the sports energy type products out on the course that one can normally expect. And I drank virtually at every station. Most of the time, about half the time, sort of the Gatorade type products. You know, there's several different of those products. There's not just Gatorade, but and a few of the oral ones, the gels, had those a couple of times. So I never even really got to use the mix that I took with me, and I felt like I was getting what I needed in order to avoid hitting the wall. Okay, for those of you who've seen the prior videos, I made a bunch of recommendations or discussions concerning possibilities in terms of gear to take with me and or to wear for the marathon. You've got to remember that I am now 25 years older than the last time I was in a marathon, and that since this is a foreign course to me in terms of I've never run on it before, that and the fact that you know, I'm 64 years old now, had a big effect on my approach to the whole race. I was not really clear in my own mind as to what the weather would be like for the course. I was very concerned, given my age and etc., etc., not to make excuses, but you know, getting back to the finish, what would happen if I did in fact break down on the course. I had anticipated that the weather would be very cool, if not cold, and windy for that time of year in Pittsburgh. About 2 weeks before the race, it all of a sudden looked like it was all of a sudden going to be in the mid-70s and sunny, which would have been hot by marathon standards. But then by race time, it came back to closer to what I originally anticipated it would be. In 80 and 82, when I did my best marathon times, I didn't stop at all during the race, and I ran the whole race. I didn't stop at all for Gatorade, for water, for anything, and we didn't have sports gels back in those days. And so runners were more likely to hit the wall. Here, fortunately, in the Pittsburgh Marathon, they provided gel and had plenty of water and Gatorade and sports drink stations along the way. So the entire feel and the entire circumstance was a lot different than when I ran. The technology of running and understanding of hitting the wall is better today than it was back in those days. In any event, so I'm sure that some folks, some of the more experienced runners would wonder what the heck I was talking about in terms of bringing a lot of that gear along, but I simply did not know what to expect out on the course or what type of assistance I would get out there if things went sideways. I just want to say that one thing that I didn't mention in the video is the thing about taping one's nipples before the race. Now it was wet, and that's prime type of circumstance to get a lot of chafing in your breast area if you don't apply some band-aids to your nipples before the race. Well, I didn't, and it didn't hurt me too much during the race, but I did pay the price a little bit the next day, so I thought I would also point that out. But in any event, I hope that this clarifies the situation a little. So anyway, so I ended up wearing my tie-dye colored red top that I always wear in practice. And I had taken off, by the time we got to the starting line, I had taken off my white dry fit and was wearing this hat. I never ended up using my poncho, even though at the beginning it was more of a mist. It rained as we were lining up, and then it sort of turned into a mist. And then I would say about 6 miles into the race, it became a light rain, and it stayed a light rain up until about, there was never a downpour, but there was a light rain for about, I'd say the first quarter of the race, it was predominantly just a mist almost. Then for the next 12, 14 miles, it was a light rain, and then it pretty much at the end it more or less cleared up. But it was raining enough that there was water dripping off of the bill of my cap around mile 16 or so. And my shoes were getting wet. My shoes were actually getting wet, you know, basically about 4 miles. What I'm saying is, on a certain level, we had done all this planning. I was overweight, had broken down on the diet. The equipment that I decided to take, I did take my cell phone, I did take my wallet. I had these three pouch belts on that worked fine. They worked great. Right as I'm leaving the hotel to go down to the start line, I put on one of my favorite motivational tunes, You Wreck Me by Tom Petty, just to get me all psyched up, and that tune always does. And so when we went down to the lineup, they set you off into 4 corrals, A, B, C, and D. I was in D, which was the slowest group, and they had more or less a staggered time. And the way they were keeping time was a source of great confusion towards me, great source of anxiety for the whole race. That anxiety was assuaged a tiny bit at a certain point, but I'll talk more about that as we speak. But in a sense, as slow as I was, you know, I actually was in a race. I mean, I was in a race not to get disqualified. But in any event, I'll talk about that in 1 second. But anyway, I think before we have the gun go off and we start, I thought I would tell you a bit about all that stuff. I wore 2 sets of knee pads on both knees. Now I wore those knee pads not to protect my knees, but the reason I wear the knee pads is they do a remarkably good job of keeping me from extending my leg when I stride out too far too quickly. It's really a very tacit sort of mental signal that the pads give my brain, because I'm very likely, one of the ways that you can pull a muscle is that you get a quick sort of floppy type of extension in the leg, and that occurs a lot during downhills, or just any time. If you just sort of throw your leg out there, you're more likely to get a pulled muscle. So the knee pads are really designed to prevent hamstring pulls and to protect my sciatica than they are to protect my knees. But I decided, after great internal debate, because I don't use those knee pads all the time during practice. For a while I did early in my training, but after a while I got away from it, because if you wear them for like more than 6 or 7 miles, I've got the scabs to prove it, they start to dig into your legs, and they did in this case, but not too bad. Sometimes it gets so bad that I have to take them off, but during the marathon, I had great fortune. They did their job, and even though I could tell they were digging in a little bit, it didn't bother me enough where I decided to stop and take it. I put of course, that clear tape around my thighs in 3 spots to keep this hamstring in place. And I put 1 extra roll of clear tape in my pocket for the marathon in case my calves felt like they were going to cramp up, or I had problems down in the Achilles tendon area, or even with my sciatica when I had I would have some clear tape to put on. And so now it's time for the race, and I decided that I'd had enough of anxiety and that I needed to sort of get pumped up. So I, right as I'm leaving the hotel to go down to the start line, I put on one of my favorite motivational tunes, You Wreck Me by Tom Petty, just to get me all psyched up, and that tune always does. So that's sort of, so in the morning of the marathon, got down there to the starting line. It was raining, very energized. You know, anybody that's ever lined up for a marathon, especially their first one, this is my 5th, but it's been 25 years, knows that that's just an incredible experience to be down there waiting for the race to start. And and all I'm thinking and all I can hear in my own mind is You Wreck Me by Tom Petty and Bad Seat by the Pandoras. But I'm in any event. So it's basically 7 o'clock Sunday, May 5th, 2019, down on Liberty Avenue in the city of Pittsburgh. We're about 4 or 5 blocks from the starting line, which is at, I believe, 10th and Liberty, down by the David Lawrence Convention Center. I mean, we're basically 2/3 of the length of the downtown city of Pittsburgh away from the starting line. And I'm behind these 4 girls who are holding these banners, and I refer to them in sort of mixing my metaphors as the four sirens of the apocalypse, because they are the last group of pacing runners. The race is very courteous and considerate in that they have these runners that have these little posters about what their pace is, and they're running at that pace. So if you run with them, you know about where you're going to finish. And they were the very last group of qualifying pacers. I need to make a point here. They do a staggered start at the Pittsburgh Marathon. Corral A goes, they're the fast people. Second fastest people, Corral B, they go. And then they let Corral C goes. And that means everybody has a different starting time. And before I forget to mention, the race instructions said that you had to finish within 7 hours or you would be disqualified and taken off the course. Corral D, the one I was in, has the last starting time. Now, let me just say this. I don't profess to have read every instruction given on the Pittsburgh Marathon website. And so some of the fault for some of this confusion here is probably clearly mine, but I'm just trying to give you my state of mind during the race. And so I don't have any problem with the way the race was handled. But I just want to say that there was a staggered start. So everything in terms of time was always a source of confusion for me. I had to rely on my watch. And anyway, so everything was guesswork. So I wanted to make that point. They let A go, then they let Corral B go, then C go. And like we're several blocks from the starting line. So we actually, I joked, it took us a few minutes just to even walk to the start line because we're several blocks back. And as the corrals are being started, we move forward. So in any event. And also, while we're walking forward towards the start line, I'm psyched up. I'm getting pumped up. I'm worried, but I'm also pumped up. I'm a lot of conflicting emotions, but basically positive feeling. And even though it's in the temperatures in the 50s and there's slight precipitation still going on in the air, and it's sort of wet, I decided to take my white dry fit off and tie it around my waist, and that's the way I ran. Okay, so Corral D has moved forward. We're right at the starting line now. Corrals A, B, and C have been started there down the road, and finally the horn sounds and we're off. Now, like I said, I've been a little bit concerned about my hamstrings. And the thing of it is you're lined up. The organizers of the marathon tried, by virtue of having these corrals, tried to keep runners that went about the same speed together, so you didn't have runners with a lot of different speeds lined up together and people trying to run over each other, and it would just create mayhem. But we were also lined up with half marathoners and relay people, and it's so still some of those folks were out there and they were moving a little bit fast. I immediately forsook my my theory of trying to stay in the middle of the road, the flat place, although the road there, fortunately, at the very beginning was fairly flat anyway, so it was no big deal. But I moved quickly over to over near the sidewalk, because even though I tried to stretch out while I was waiting for the marathon to start, I was a little bit tight, and these people were running by me and frankly making my stomach churn, and because I feel like I should be moving fast. So I sort of got over to the side of the road. And as luck would have it, I was alarmed immediately, because within the first several hundred meters, I feel a twinge in my hamstring. And so I pulled to the side of the road, got off the course, got on the sidewalk, and stretched for probably about 30 seconds. Now, I was probably at the start of the race, about halfway back in Corral D behind the four wonderful ladies that I will refer, I think there were four of them, that I will refer to, or I have referred to as the four sirens of the apocalypse, mixing my metaphors of Revelation in the Bible and Homer's Odyssey. The sirens being these ladies that if you listen to them, disaster would occur to you because they represented temptation. But anyway, I digress. Anyway, so I'm stretching, and meanwhile, everybody else in Corral D is running past me, and I was over there. I'll say for about I don't know. It seemed like about a minute, but all of Corral D had not passed by when I got back on the course. That's all I can say. I don't really know how long I was over. I was probably over there for about 25 seconds, maybe, when I think about it. But anyway, I got back on the course, and I immediately just try to calm myself down and not race, even though some of these relay people are trying to move a little bit faster and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, so I get back on the course, and I sort of do stay over to the side because I actually want people to pass me. Meanwhile, the four sirens of the apocalypse, from my field of vision anyway, have disappeared down the road. Now, the opening stretch of the Pittsburgh Marathon, you're running east, actually slightly northeast. I think that's still Liberty Avenue. And you run way out, you run out a couple miles.
Actually, what you do is you run northeast along, well, I guess that is Liberty, and then you do sort of a U-turn. You come back along Penn Avenue before you get to like 16th Street. You make a right turn to go across the 16th Street Bridge.
So what's known as that's the 16th Street Bridge, which I believe they call the David McCullough Bridge, the historian writer. That is the first bridge that we ultimately will cross. I think that's, like I said, I think that's about two miles into the race. Anyway, all I'm trying to do is just not allow myself to get caught up in the event. I'm trying to preserve my hamstrings. Like I said, I feel a little bit on the heavy side. I decided I'm going to try to maintain my composure, try to stay in the middle of the road. Just remember, try to keep my running style as smooth as possible so there's not a lot of up and down motion. Stay smooth, it's easier on the knees. The roads were unbelievably flat for the most part in many places on the race course. I was really surprised because Pittsburgh is a very, very hilly place. Anyway, the roads were flat. I mean, when I'm talking about side to side, no side, running on the side of a hill, where your ankles are doing this number. Pronation, I guess, is the word. They're not pronate. You're able to go like this, which is what I'm looking for. So anyway, so we run, and finally I noticed that we are in fact crossing the 16th Street Bridge, which crosses the Allegheny River. Very surprised that the wind, even though it had been raining, I didn't notice the wind that much. This really shocked me. I expected this to be a very windy race, but the wind was under control, and even on the bridge. And then you make a turn. Once you cross the Allegheny River on that bridge, you turn west towards the baseball stadium, the football stadium, and you're basically running actually along the north shore of the Allegheny towards the Ohio River and the West End Bridge.
Now at this point, the twists and turns in the roads, plural, along the north side of the Allegheny River and down towards the West End, and you pass the baseball stadium, PNC Park, and Heinz Field, and there's a lot of bridge work down there, limited access highway entrances, and the twists and turns are very complicated. It was very difficult for me to take pictures of this portion of the race course And while I was running, I was so concerned about the race and trying to maintain myself and not get psyched out that frankly I didn't even know that I had passed or was passing Heinz Field. I did happen to notice the baseball stadium, and that I was lucky to do because I was just so focused on just staying on the race course, staying in the middle. And it was like it seemed like I was running for a while. We just got to the point where just all of a sudden the West End Bridge appears, and that's like 6 miles into the race course.
Um, the West End Bridge crosses the Ohio River, and that's down there about, the West End Bridge is about 6 miles, 6.5 to the 7 mile mark. If you're on that bridge, you've basically done a 10K right there. But running along the North Shore, all I could think of was, "Oh, Dave, just hang on to your situation as long as you can. I know that you're, I was a little upset, very concerned because of the lag between the start between Corral A and our corral, because I didn't know if they were going to close the course. The start time of Corral A was 7:05, so that meant under the 7-hour rule that they would close the course down at 2:05, under my understanding of the rules. This was a constant source of worry during the course of the case, because I'm sitting here trying to figure out, what this meant to me when I was running along the North Shore was I've actually got to run this race in 6 hours and 30 minutes. Like I said, I thought I was a little overweight, not sure I could make it at all. Knew that I would have to probably walk if I was going to finish the race, a portion of the race. And I tighten up when I have to walk after I've run a long way, and I can't even walk very fast. So this was all sorts of consternation. But I keep running, and I stay in the middle of the course, try to keep a smooth, steady stroke so I'm not bouncing up and down a lot. Trying to keep a little distance between other runners so that people aren't bumping into me and running in front of me and all this kind of stuff. It was pretty good in that sense, not any major bumps or anything like that. Looked up at a certain point, and I remember I said, "That's a strange looking building." Well, it was PNC Park. PNC Park is basically coming back along the north side, pretty much parallel to where the starting line was, and kept running beyond that. You start noticing it. By this time you start noticing people on the race course. There's certain people out there that are running, and you just sort of notice them. I remember there were two guys that appeared some, and another thing that I noticed, there were a lot of people out there that were doing what I would call speed walking. And they could walk pretty fast. They really could. We had a few of those, and I noticed them. Some chatter going on and all this kind of stuff. The crowds were great, cheering the runners on. And I was so engrossed, ensconced in the run, I didn't even notice when we ran past the football field, Heinz Field, which is basically out near the which is called the Golden Triangle, which is at that point at which the Monongahela and the Allegheny form the Ohio, down there at the Golden Triangle. Well, that's where Heinz Field is, the football stadium where the Steelers play. Anyway, didn't even notice it. Ran right past it, didn't even notice it. Was focused on the road. You're supposed to run with your head up so you can get more oxygen. That's the way you're supposed to run, but I'm not. I was just very much into preserving my body, and just focused on hoping I could make the next block. So anyway, ultimately we make the turn. Like I said, it's about 6.25 miles out, getting close to the 7-mile mark. You turn on to the West End Bridge, and you cross. At this point, the city of Pittsburgh is not between the two sides of the river. The two sides of the river, the north side and the south side of Pittsburgh. You cross over the West End Bridge, and I think that into the area called Steuben, I think that's what that's called. Anyway, it's a very when you get on that side of that bridge over there, you know, there was a band playing over there, and when you get onto that side of the bridge over there, you sort of disappear behind this hill, and you can't even see the city of Pittsburgh, and you really think you're out in the country. It's just amazing. You go into a neighborhood there that you would probably be more inclined to think that you would find in more remote areas of West Virginia. People there were great fans. A little more, you know, people playing guitars on the side and being cheered on, a little hilly, but it was like almost being on a different planet. I mean, you would have been, you sort of all of a sudden thought you were running in a different event. So anyway, because the feel over there, like I said, was a little bit more rural. But that's the thing about the city of Pittsburgh. There's so many hills that you can be, and there aren't really blocks there. I mean, it's there's no such thing almost as going around the block. I mean, every road sort of goes off in its different direction. But anyway.
Okay, now at this point my feet have gotten wet, and one of my shoes feels like it's rubbing against my toes. The wetness had just come because moisture's been falling from the air, a little bit of splashing here and there from other puddles, from other runners, and your feet get wet. So I had to stop, untied my triple knotted shoes, well, one of them, and retie the shoe. Of course, you know, that takes a little bit of time, and time is of the essence because I'm worried about, you know, finishing with a qualifying time before the 7 hours expires.
Circled around that little area over there, came back up the other side. Now I've been running the whole time, and when we come back through, and we're sooner or later we end up on this street called Carson Street, which is the main street along the south side.
Now that picture you see on the screen right there shows some improvements down along the base of that mountain over there below what appears to be a mountain. Well, that's part of what ultimately becomes Mount Washington, which overlooks the Golden Triangle. Carson Street, which is what we are now approaching, runs along where those improvements are at the base of that mountain over there.
Of the Monongahela River. We've crossed over the Ohio, and we've headed back towards on the opposite side of the riverbank from the Golden Triangle and the Point. So we're actually heading back, and we're to the point where we can see the city of Pittsburgh again, downtown. Come up through there, and at this point I guess I've made up enough ground where I come up, and for the first time in the race, I actually see the four sirens of the apocalypse. And the four sirens of the apocalypse were a constant. They were sort of my competition in the race, because my general sense impression was I sort of had to more or less assume that was the group that was going to be the cutoff point for disqualification because you're taking too much time on the race course. So that's why I sort of call them the four sirens of the apocalypse, is because I viewed them as the end. In a way, and I was very unclear as to what the rule was. But anyway, so I got up to the point, and I got to the point where I sort of came up abreast of them, and I look up and I see this bridge, and just to show you how sort of disappointed, I don't know what I was thinking. I look up and I see this bridge, and I go, wow, that's the Birmingham Bridge. It was almost like a mirage or something. I must have been delusional or something. Well, because the Birmingham Bridge is like the major event in this, aside from finishing. Crossing the Birmingham Bridge and running up into Oakland, to me, is the big thing. So anyway, I see it, all of a sudden I'm pumped up. I'm going to cross the Birmingham Bridge. Well, I run a little bit further, and all of a sudden I realized that's not the Birmingham Bridge, you idiot. There was the Fort Pitt Tunnel Bridge, which is the bridge that you cross coming through Mount Washington to enter downtown Pittsburgh, which is like several miles short of the Birmingham Bridge. In fact, I think there are two other bridges before, in addition to the Fort Pitt Bridge, Fort Pitt Tunnel Bridge. There are two other bridges, and then the Birmingham Bridge. Anyway, so we run, catch up to the four sirens of the apocalypse, and I actually pass them. And at this point, what was originally in this race a mist, and maybe a sprinkle here and there, and really almost perfect running weather for a marathon, because it's cool. It's maybe high 50s. I don't know if it had reached 60 or not. I don't think it had even hit 60, but at this point in the race. So anyway, but we're running, and I pass them, which makes me feel good. But all of a sudden, it starts raining a little bit. Now, big crowds down along Carson Street. You pass Station Square, which is a big. It's sort of like it's a mall, an indoor mall, and I think they have some entertainment down there periodically. So it's sort of, we pass that area, get onto Carson Street. Carson Street was a big, when I was in school there was a lot of night spots down there, and some good crowds down along there. But anyway, it's starting to rain a little bit more. It's getting, the course is getting more wet. This meant that
Okay, now Carson Street is several miles long, and like I indicated, it was raining, but now the rain has picked up. It's getting wetter outside. I'm actually seeing an occasional drop of rain fall from the brim of my cap. And I realize that whoever is probably going to win this race is probably on the verge of crossing the finish line in downtown Pittsburgh, probably about 22 miles ahead of us, but which is actually just across the river from us. It's probably happening right now as we're passing Station Square there on Carson Street. Kind of a depressing thought. But we continue along. Like I said, we pass the sirens, and there's a lot of partying going on along Carson Street. The fans there are great. They've probably seen a heck of a lot of runners, have been out there a while at this point, but that hadn't dampened their enthusiasm. And anyway, so lo and behold, because of the wetness, I'm developing a problem with my other shoe. It's beginning to rub, and it feels like I'm going to get a blister, which a dreaded blister in a marathon is really, really, really nasty. And so I can't have that. So I've got the triple knot problem again on my shoe with the tying and untying of it and all that kind of stuff. And knowing darn well that the sirens are going to pass me again, if I pull over to the side, nevertheless, I know that I'm going to have to take care of this potential problem before it gets much worse. So I pull over to the side of the road, and indeed, when I do, the sirens pass.
And at this point, we get down, and sooner or later, we're coming closer and closer to the Birmingham Bridge. We've passed under three bridges. At long last, we come to the Birmingham Bridge and the ascent into Oakland. And then the folks who are running the half marathon and the relay people are broken off from the marathon people at the Birmingham Bridge. The half marathoners and the relay people run down one side of the Birmingham Bridge, and the marathoners are directed to run down another side of the Birmingham Bridge, which is the bridge from the south bank of the Monongahela over back into the triangle, the central part of Pittsburgh. But this goes up into Oakland, which is importantly is my old neighborhood and the University of Pittsburgh, where I went to school at one time. So this this to me was the, naturally I wanted to finish the marathon, that was the main thing, but short of that, this is really what I wanted to do. This was like the mini marathon for me. I wanted to run, even if I couldn't finish the marathon, I wanted to run the whole way up, the hill from Carson Street down on the south side up into Oakland. Now that, where University of Pittsburgh is, in my old apartment. And I was married at the time when I lived there. More about that in a second. But anyway, now it's a little bit ambiguous to me, but I've looked at the maps and everything. It looks to me like the total trek from the south side of the Birmingham Bridge up into Oakland is basically somewhere between a mile to a mile and a half, and it is 97% all uphill. And because there's the bridge itself arches up, and so actually the minute you get on the bridge you're actually going uphill, and it starts to come down and level off a little bit, and then there's an off ramp, but then you immediately go, once you get off the bridge, you immediately run alongside of a hill up, slightly inclining up in the hill that sits below Oakland, and then there's a sort of a little bit of a cut in the hill, and you make a sharp left and you go uphill again, and you're running steeper and steeper right into Oakland, and at the end of the street,
like Valhalla.
it is the Cathedral of Learning, and it's like a beacon, and it sits right at the end. It appears to be sitting right, like, you know, like Oz in the Wizard of Oz. It's sitting there at the end of what appears to be the end of Forbes Avenue. Of course, Forbes goes on, but you're going uphill, 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 and it's getting steeper. And I looked at the map, and it's got to be at least, to me, it looks like it's, I'm going to say somewhere between a mile and an eighth and a mile and a quarter uphill. May even be longer, I don't know. But, and then it levels off right as you get about a block or two in front of the Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh Law School area, which there's a bridge, a causeway over Forbes Avenue. And the amazing thing is that it's raining out there, and the organizers of the race have done a good job of removing all the cars, and you're basically on a road that's about 4 lanes wide. Most of the cars have been removed. I think, my recollection, it just seemed like I was on an airport. I mean, it was wide the whole way up there, but but I'm sort of getting ahead of myself. All right, so we get on the Birmingham Bridge, and the first of all, when we went to get on the Birmingham Bridge, they had siphoned off the half marathoners and the relay people, so now it's just the marathoners, and you don't quite get a sense of it until you turn onto the bridge, and lo and behold, there are the 4 sirens right there in front of me, and in front of them there's nobody. It's just the Birmingham Bridge, vacant. All the half marathoners, everybody else is over on the other side of the bridge, and it's divided there, the bridge is. And on our side, it's just me, the 4 sirens, and there's like a guy up probably about 200 or 300 feet ahead who appears like he's like speed walking almost.
Now, I cannot possibly convey to you the feeling of intense isolation, yet overwhelming excitement at this, because all of a sudden you're alone, it's you and the road, and it's a life examined, because certainly anybody in the stands or on the streets is watching this, they only see you because you're basically alone. So I'm going to get a chance to go and do my dream run by myself, but yet under the spotlight. And this was a very intense experience, to say the least.
So I'm following the four sirens, and I discovered that what they're doing here at this point is they run for a while fairly fast, and then they walk. They run, and then they walk. I don't know how long they were running and how long they were walking, but they did this in unison. And that was their method of operation throughout the remainder of the race. I don't know what point they started doing that, but that was what they did throughout the remainder of the race. And the way it worked out was every time they would run faster than I ran. And every time they walked, my running would be faster than their walking. So it was always like this, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But when I continued to run, I gradually started to pull away from them. And about halfway across the Birmingham Bridge, I passed them and I started to open up a distance between me and them. With just this guy in front of me, this speed walker. Now in the distance I could see 2 or 3 people on the off-ramp and starting to make their way up the side of that hill. Anyway, so let's see. Like I said, this was the miniature event. If I couldn't finish the marathon, I wanted to at least do this. So I'm really focused on this, and by dingies, I'm going to make it up this hill running. Okay, so I'm going up the side of this hill, and I start getting really close to this walker, and I think I even passed him on the way up the side of that mountain, that hill, and but
I remember after running uphill for what seemed like an eternity already, I made that turn at that elbow. I'd gone up the side of that hill, but now I was making that turn to the steep portion of that road up towards the Cathedral of Learning, and that elbow under that overpass up there. And what an intense experience when all of a sudden there appears the Cathedral of Learning. And it's such an exciting sight at that point, but it's dampened somewhat because you see how steep the road's going to be. And I remember these officials were walking down the hill, and it was like they were coming down there to check to see if I was okay, but they were encouraging me to go on, go on. And I was just, at that point, I was just even more determined than ever to get up the rest of that hill. And it was a big struggle.
And so intense. But you know, we're 12 miles into the race, and I'm really tired, but I'm even more motivated. And I kept going, and you know, finally, the road starts to level out a little bit, and I realize that I'm actually going to be in the land where Forbes Field used to be, where my heroes I used to watch the Pirates with my dad, and Bill Mazeroski hit his 7th game 1960 World Series home run. And incidentally, there's a home plate from the old Forbes Field is in one of the University of Pittsburgh academic buildings, and it's close to being where it is in its original place.
And the old Forbes Field left and center field wall, where Bill Mazeroski's 7th game home run in 1960 cleared the fence. There's a plaque out there, and the left and center field wall still runs into the business school at the University of Pittsburgh. There's a causeway over over Forbes Avenue, which I think connects close to the University Law School, right down there near the Pitt Student Union, which appears to sit right in front of the Cathedral of Learning. And that's probably where Babe Ruth stayed the night before he hit his last major league home run, which was oddly enough in Forbes Field. First guy to hit it over the roof. You know, and of course the Cathedral of Learning, 42 stories high, tallest academic building in the Western Hemisphere. I think the Russians have a building that's taller, but I don't know. In any event, Pitt Stadium used to be up there. Used to go see Pitt football games up there. And, I remember Hemingway's was down there. Oh, and the Big O. Yeah, the Big O, major place to get hot dogs or lunch there on campus right there. I believe that's down there at the corner also. And, but the amazing thing was the fans, out there braving the rain and no traffic. So it was sort of a wide expanse, and and I was pretty much all by myself, and it was just like this race was just for me. And it was really, in a lot of respects, just totally intensely emotional. Here we are 12 plus miles into the race. I think the halfway mark is down near the Carnegie Museum, which is down just beyond, about a block beyond the Cathedral of Learning, which is now coming as I'm going under the causeway and am abreast of the Shenley Hotel. The Cathedral of Learning is on my left, and the Carnegie Museum with statues of Galileo and Bach out in front is on my right. They've got a great dinosaur exhibit down there. Used to walk past that place every morning. And as we come to the midpoint of the marathon, I'm approaching this guy who spent a lot of time chasing him, or he chasing me for the next few miles. But I was catching this guy. I must have been so pumped up that I must have been going a little bit faster than I thought I was going at this point.
And throughout the race, every time there was a water stop, or if somebody was offering some gel for the quick pick me up for energy and electrolytes and all that kind of stuff, or Gatorade or anything like that, I would stop and drink or consume that kind of stuff because I didn't want to hit the wall later in the race. Even though it's raining, I want to make sure that I'm got enough liquid in my system so I don't become dehydrated. And which all this worried me because that slows down your time, and I'm racing against disqualification the whole time and the 4 sirens. This is a constant theme throughout, from here on to the rest of the race. I'm constantly worried about whether or not I'm going to get disqualified. Okay, at this point I'm running with this gentleman who will be with me, or I will be with him for the next several miles. We basically come to the corner right there at, I believe it's Craig Street. I used to walk up and down it on the way to class. I should know, but I believe it's Craig. And we're just now passing the halfway mark of the marathon. We're right at the corner at Forbes and Craig, like I said, pretty much at the spot where my ex-wife told me she wanted a divorce. And we turn on to Craig, and we run down there, and it's starting to get a little more and more noticeable. I mean, it's been wet. It's obviously been wet, but I'm really beginning to feel more soaked. And I begin to feel a few raindrops appear on the bill of my cap. And we go that block or two on Craig, and then we make a right onto the broad open expanse of Forbes Avenue. And right there on the left-hand side at 5th and Neville is my old apartment building. Basically at this point, we're right sort of on the border between the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon. But there on the right-hand side of 5th Avenue sits Central Catholic High School, where Dan Marino went to high school. And just beyond that is the building where Fred Rogers made Mr. Rogers. I've forgotten the call letters for that television station in that lighter color building on the right. Like I said, I'm starting to. It's still pretty much. It's still broad open expanse and wide open, wide lanes, but now we seem to be approaching or getting closer to people that we can see more numerous other runners in front of us, a couple blocks ahead of us. So they're either slowing up or we're speeding up. I know that probably I sped up a little bit because of my adrenaline was pumping. But at this point, reality is beginning to set back in. My feet are beginning to feel a little bit wet. I'm beginning to feel a little more wet. I'm also starting to realize that I'm tightening up a little bit, and I know that here we are now. We're not really technically in Oakland anymore. We're now in Shadyside, and from this point in the race forward, like I said, I'm starting to feel tighter. I'm starting to feel the wear and tear of the race more and more, and the race becomes much more of a residential type of race. It's more in the more residential areas of the city of Pittsburgh. A lot more tree-lined streets, a lot more personal homes. Although we still do run through some commercial areas, but in that sense, it's. The landmarks are a little less historical, or have less historical relevance, at least to me anyway, than some of the places we've already been or will be once we get back to downtown, if we are fortunate enough and can hold our body enough together that long to get back downtown. But I guess that's the name of the game. I'm not sure, I can't remember at this point if I'm that aware of where the sirens of the apocalypse are. I'm just, like I said, I'm starting to get tighter and tighter, and we're going down Fifth Avenue now, and we've got to make that left into on, I think it's Aiken, to get down there, and Shadyside to get down to one of my favorite streets, which is Walnut Street, which is where some of my nightlife bars and clubs used to be as well. There's some nice shops down there, but Walnut Street is sort of a happening place. Like I said, we're 14 and a half miles into the race, and now they're in this area. We've caught up to some other people, and at this point, I'm feeling, it's like I said. Now we've got sort of a slow, steady rain. My feet are getting a little on the wet side. I'm feeling good about the fact that I made it up that hill, feeling like I accomplished something. But we're 14 and change into the race, and I'm beginning to feel it, and I'm starting to think about what I'm going to do. But anyway, we make it through. Walnut. At this point, I think somewhere not too long after that, and I'm not sure exactly where. It was right around the 16-mile mark that I just said, you know what, I don't think I'm going to be able to run all of this. And so I decided if I'm going to actually cross the finish line, because my legs are killing. I knew that would happen. All marathoners go through that, and it's sort of like hitting the wall or something. I don't think I had hit the wall yet. I had started this race, and I had picked up several pounds. As a matter of fact, by my estimation, I had picked up close, believe it or not, close to 15, maybe 20 pounds.
Actually, the real weight would depend on when I count the weight. The weigh-ins varied, but anyway, anywhere from 7 pounds additional weight I added to my personal weight, up to 22 really, but probably the real figure was probably closer to about 10 pounds. My real weight was probably around 201 as opposed to my objective of 191.
I felt that way, and I felt like I was having hamstring problems before the race, and I was very concerned about, if I totally exhausted myself, if I totally exhausted my legs running, what happens to me is I get so tight that I was afraid that I would get injured, I was afraid of injury is what I was really afraid of, and I get really, really tight I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to walk fast enough to finish the race. So I wanted to preserve enough in my legs that even if I wasn't running, that I would be able to walk fast enough to approximate, you know, at least 16-minute miles if I did some occasional running in there amongst the walking. That was my strategy. So I decided to engage in a run-walk strategy somewhere after the 16-mile mark, not too long after. And by that time, I had been running, according to the clock that I ran by, I think it was 4 hours and 10 minutes, which is actually longer than it took me to run my first marathon that I completed. I completed my first marathon in 4 hours and 2 minutes. My record is 3 hours and 42 minutes and 36 seconds. You know, at this point, I've only gone 16 miles, but I've been, according to this clock, I've been running for 4 hours and 10 minutes. Maybe it was 4 hours and 20 minutes. It was one or the other. And I thought, well, you know, I think I've probably set some sort of record for how long I've run. I finished one marathon when I was 40 years old, and I had an injury, and I had to walk for a while in that race because I injured my my arch in my foot in 1994. I did that. I completed that marathon in 4 hours and 20 minutes. But here I've gone 16 miles in 4 hours and some. So that tells you how much I've slowed down. So anyway, so I start to run walk, and at this point, when I had gone through Oakland, I had caught up to this guy. He looked like he was about my age, but he was smaller. There were two men that I would occasionally run into over the final portions of the marathon. Both of them were roughly my age, but smaller. And both of them were obviously real pros at the marathon, even though they were older, were a little bit slower. I mean, you could tell these guys were warriors that had seen the marathon battles. Matter of fact, one guy was giving me a lecture on, you know, electrolytes and, you know, making sure you drank enough and all that kind of stuff. And as luck would have it, at the end he was just pulling away from me like crazy, and so did the other guy. But at this point in the race, I had caught them and was looking like I was going to lead them or pass them or finish ahead of them. Anyway, I ran with these guys for a while. When I say run with them, we really didn't talk. It was just anything we said to each other, we may have said a total of like 5 or 6 sentences to each other. But anyway, and you would run into people, some that had, you know, physical you know, I shouldn't say deformities, but were challenged physically. Either, I don't know if it was congenital or if it was, you know, they had an injury or something like that. And some of these things, I'm very strong on maintaining equal force and equal pressure on both legs, because if you favor one side or the other, you're going to overexert one side or the other, and you're going to break down. Well, some people, I mean, one lady that I saw, maybe 2 or 3 even, you know, they had obviously had something wrong with one leg or something. They're like practically limping, and you know, and this wasn't a recently sustained injury. I mean, and then I saw people that were like, you know, that looked to me like they were 50 pounds overweight, even marginally fat, just no real problem. Here I am trying to lose weight. But anyway, and this is what you're seeing later in the race, and it's war out there at this point, because people are engaging in any and every tactic to try to finish this race, and that's what I was doing as well. And it's, you know, and it's moist, it's raining out there. It's not a thunderstorm. It was just like drip, 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 mist, drip, drip, mist, drip, 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 drip. That's the way the whole race was. And so now I've got little raindrops coming off the bill of my cap and all this kind of stuff. And I have to stop several times to apply tape to my legs. I have my, you know, the clear plastic tape. I would tighten up the tape on this on the bad hamstring. I put some tape on my left calf because it felt like I was going to get, you know, I was going to pull that or something. So I taped that. I taped down near my Achilles tendon.
Now I'm talking here about actually stopping for a second to tape, which to apply this tape, actually put it on during the race. I had put a small roll of that clear tape in my pocket, but the only problem, of course, with doing this is it takes a little bit of time to do this. Thank goodness that clear plastic tape is very, very easy to tear, and I can actually apply it fairly quickly. Thank goodness. But you still have to stop to do that. And frankly, I don't even remember all the places I did that, but now we're talking later in the race after I had started run walking.
Because it was starting to get sore. I was afraid that would go. Two things that really worried me a little bit were occasionally I would get this thing that felt like I was getting a hip pointer, and then like right here, just below my appendix, the very top of my thigh, every now and then I would get a pinch there, and both of those are the kinds of things that typically cause me the pain and the problems that make me want to quit. I had hints of that, but they just sort of lurked there on the side. But I was constantly running, trying not to tax anything in my legs too much. That was the constant dictation, was preserve. Here you are trying to finish. I was afraid I was going to get disqualified because by this point, after I had right after I had stopped at the 16-mile mark, the sirens of the apocalypse had caught me again and now had passed me, because I was no longer running all the time. I was run walking. So they had passed me. And when they disappeared from sight, I became very, very concerned, very, very alarmed, especially because I was doing calculations based on that clock that I saw right around the 16-mile mark and the 7-hour rule and all that kind of stuff, and I came to the conclusion that I was on the verge somewhere of getting disqualified. So I was very concerned about this, and so I started running again. And I did a little walking, but a lot less walking now, but I would run. I tried to run more than I thought that the sirens were running. I was going to run and walk like the sirens were running, but I was going to run more than the sirens were running. That was my strategy, probably from about mile 18 to about mile 22. And lo and behold, I look up at one point and there are the sirens. And so I catch up to the sirens eventually. And at this point my body is like, I'm scared that I'm going to get disqualified, but now I've got some comfort because I've caught the sirens. Anyway, so I would come up to the 4 sirens of the apocalypse, and I finally just put the question to them. I said, are you the last? If anybody finishes behind you, are they disqualified? And they said, no. I said, well, do they have something come up? And she didn't answer my question. She said, they're supposed to we started about a half an hour. This is what she said. I'm paraphrasing. We started about a half an hour after everybody else did. So what they're telling us is that they're going to keep the course open an extra half hour. And then this made me just very joyous, because now I'm not sweating bullets, because her little sign says 6 hours and 30 minutes. It's supposed to be a 7-hour, and I'm right with them. And I don't even know how accurate their pace was in retrospect, and reasons for that will become obvious when I finish this video. Anyway, so I come up to them, and make a long story short, we get to a point in the race course where I'm really getting tired. I'm having a hard time keeping up with them, and we're about 23 miles on now. And finally, we almost make a wrong turn. In fact, the sirens almost made a wrong turn, and I happened to be with them when this happened. Well, we actually had to stop in our tracks and ask some lady which way the marathon was. Anyway, some lady straightened us out, and we made a turn, the correct turn, and we made the correct turn, and at this point, I'm still hanging with the sirens, but all of a sudden I have to relieve myself. And this is the first time in the race I have to relieve myself. So they have the porta potties out there. So I find a porta potty. A little bit of a story there itself. I spent longer than I wanted to at the porta potty. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so now I come back out, and the sirens are, I can't see the sirens. I don't know where they are. They're ahead of me somewhere. But I'm back on the course, and I'm trying to run walk. And like I said, the sirens had passed me, and I would catch up to them, and they would pass me, and this went on. But we went through this, and frankly, to be honest, it gets a little confusing. We go through this. I can't remember. I think we went first through Bloomfield, which is a very nice area of town, a lot of nice spots there, a lot of good restaurants. I remember from my graduate school days, my ex and I would go down there and we would have some nice meals. Went through the Bloomfield area. Very supportive crowds down there, probably as big a crowds down there as we saw on the race course. But I'm really hurting. I'm walking as fast as I can, running some, walking, running, and it's you're sort of like, your mind is just, the sirens are, I think that at this point where they were with respect to me, where they were ahead of me, I could see them, but they looked to be about a block ahead. I think, in any event, it made it through Bloomfield, and I think at this point we're either on Baum or Liberty there. I can't remember. Anyway, we make it through Bloomfield, and then I have to, unfortunately, nature calls again, and at this point I have to get off of the race course. Now, I was a little bit faster this time, but unfortunately, when I came out of the porta potties this second time here, this time, the sirens are long gone. I never see them again in the race at all, and so a little that was sort of like leaving Mama for the first time, I guess is the best way to describe it. I felt a little forlorn, but got back out on the course, and at this point, it seemed like the characters in the race stayed pretty much the same. It seemed like, nobody could make up any, there wasn't much passing going on at this point in the race, that's for sure. But at this point in the race, what happens is you start approaching this area at Liberty Avenue, where it sort of starts making slight dog legs to the left, but you start to go slightly downhill and then steeper downhill for a while, and so but for me that presents its own challenges. Okay, so you're struggling, or I'm struggling downhill, running and walking, and very conscious of the time, still a little bit worried because the sirens have long since disappeared, but Liberty Avenue, bending slightly to the left, comes down that hill. I guess we're at the mile 23 or 24 mark, and then you come to this place where like a vista, a shining vista, is the distant foggy skyline of your objective. This downtown Pittsburgh is in sight, and it is just a wonderful feeling to know that there will be a finish to this endless test of endurance. So anyway, there's the city of Pittsburgh, and you're on Liberty Avenue, and it's a long, straight, and thankfully flat shot into Pittsburgh, into downtown. The only thing that's a damper is that it's sufficiently far away where it's actually still a little bit hazy, the skyline. And number two, you're going to have to finish on the other side of that skyline, because unlike the start line, which is on the northeast part of downtown, the finish line is in the southwest part of downtown Pittsburgh, over on Boulevard of the Allies. So you're really going to have to get on the other side of that. But never mind about that. Finally, the objective is in sight, and so off I sort of hobble, running, walking, and it's just like the people in front of you. There's like a group of like 1 or 2 people about 50 yards in front of me, and another group of 1 or 2 people about 50 yards in front of them, and all of us sort of look like the Night of the Living Dead being drawn by some magnet towards downtown Pittsburgh. It's quite a vision, but it's a long straight shot, and you see everything in front of you, so it's really sort of an amazing experience. That's sort of one of the more dramatic approaches to a finish line that you're going to see in any event. So off we hobble towards downtown Pittsburgh, and we take and I don't know how long that shot is, 1.5 miles, 2 miles. I don't, it seems longer than it probably is. It's probably right about at 2 miles. And then all of a sudden what happens is you come to the spot where it's like you step from the hinterland into downtown Pittsburgh, and it's right there near the David Lawrence Civic Center, where they have the conventions down there, and it's down there near where the Penguins play. But it's all of a sudden you get this impression that you just have stepped into downtown, and you make sort of this left onto, and at this point, you really are getting a rush now. Now you're getting anticipation, but your body is just like it can barely move, let alone try to run through there. And people are just saying, "You got it now. You got it now. You've got it made. You've done it. You've done it." And it really is sort of an exciting experience. You make that. You go past like where the, like I said, the David Lawrence, and I think you make that left. I think that's on to Smithfield Street. It's either Wood or Smithfield, I forgot. But anyway, you make the left to Smithfield Street, and that takes you to you're basically running across downtown now, and you go like 5 or 6, maybe 7 blocks, I don't know, down Smithfield or Wood Street, and at that point, the anticipation begins to build, but you're just, like I feel like I'm dragging my left leg along at this point. This little, it's starting to the strain right in the hip area on the muscle there was beginning to get to me a little bit, but I'm dragging myself through downtown Pittsburgh, and all of a sudden, you can see up ahead where that turn is going to be onto the Boulevard of the Allies, which is where you turn onto. That's where the finish line is. And I remember, and I had in my belt, my handy dandy belt, my cell phone. So I unzipped the belt and I got my cell phone out, and it's a cloudy day, and for some reason, I had darkened the screen apparently to do energy saver on it or something. But because when I made that turn on the Boulevard of the Allies, I wanted very, very much to take a picture of the shot in to the finish line. So right as I'm making the turn on the Boulevard of the Allies, I pull out my camera to make the turn, and I'm just incredibly excited. We're building to the culmination of this thing. I could not get my cell phone to work. Right as I turn for the finish line, I pull it out so I just get the longest shot possible.
And there's the finish line. It's so exciting, and I'm so excited I cannot get my cell phone to work. As a matter of fact, in retrospect, the only thing I tried to take pictures even though I couldn't see the target and all that. I couldn't see the phone. I couldn't get it to work. But let me just say this. I was looking at my watch, and at this point, my watch had said, what was it, that it was like 2 minutes until 2 o'clock. Well, if the course closes in 7 hours, that means that I've got 2 minutes to get to the finish line. That thought right there. Now, believe, isn't this amazing? At this point, I'm still worried about qualification because I don't know where the sirens are. They've long since passed me, and I figured I cannot sit here. I'm not going to screw around with my cell phone trying to take this picture when I might get disqualified sitting here trying to get my cell phone to work. So I just finally just hold on to my cell phone and I just start going towards the finish line, and all I could hear in my own mind was, I just remembered, Pittsburgh, like my parents and my aunt Peg especially, we saw a lot of movies downtown Pittsburgh, and the only thing that I could think of, and the way would best describe the way I felt was, I remember one of the movies we saw, like Ben-Hur down there, the Ten Commandments, all the big movies. Back in the old days, they came out with this new technology. It was called Cinerama, and it was like their first attempt to basically surround you. The movie screen sort of semi-surrounded you. It was a very huge, wide screen. And one of the earliest movies that they did on this was this movie called, it had all the big stars in it, was How the West Was Won. Anyway, my aunt and my mom took me downtown to, I think it was the old Stanley Theater, to see How the West Was Won, and I was probably about 7 or 8, I don't know. And when that theme came on for How the West Was Won, I mean, it just made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It was just so exciting, and so that's sort of the feeling I had when I was running down the Boulevard of the Allies towards the finish line, and I it's just sort of surreal. And anyway, I finally, when I look at some of the pictures of me crossing the finish line, I sort of look like the look on my face doesn't sort of betray the thoughts that I'm feeling, because I'm thinking about all the things that I'm telling you about right now, and just I was just actually sort of, it's just one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life was running down the Boulevard of the Allies and walking through there and hitting the finish line, and people were so gracious. You come through the finish line, they immediately put that medal on you, and I turned around, and a couple guys that I had seen several times, especially earlier in the race, they apparently had just finished too, and everybody is so gracious, and the photographer came up and wanted to take some photographs, and I will probably never have an experience like that again. It was just wonderful, just absolutely wonderful, and I'll always be grateful. But and I was sort of lucky because I was only 3 blocks away from my hotel, so I could actually just walk home and walk to my hotel room and kick back and enjoy a beverage and just reflect on the amazing events of May 5th, 2019, the day I will never, ever, ever, ever forget.
Hello, just a postscript here. First of all, thanks a whole lot for watching. I hope you found it informative and at least a little bit entertaining. I wanted to thank Marathon Photo, MARATHON Photo, FOTO.com. They were responsible for the pictures of me running across the finish line, and where those pictures where I'm in a red tank top running were taken by them, and they took the pictures of me after the finish with the medal on and all that kind of stuff. And so I thank them. But all the other photos were taken by me. Most of those photos, except the ones at the very start of the race, I took those obviously the day of the race. But the photos of the course were pretty much taken 2 weeks later, and so obviously they don't show. They show, the roads as having traffic on them. And during the marathon, the city did, or Dix and the sponsors and the city, who should also be appreciated for the good job they did at clearing out the course. Anyway, I took all those pictures, but a lot of those pictures were taken a couple weeks after the race. So I wanted to clarify those points. Let's see if I got anything else. We're not. I guess we're going to get back more to economics and business discussions and some politics. President Trump and Congress, and naturally at loggerheads right now, a lot of heavy, important political stuff going on. So at Reason and Balance, we're going to sort of turn back to those subject matters in the upcoming videos. But I want to thank you very much for watching this video. And like I said, I hope you learned something. I sure as heck did. Thanks a lot.
Dum dum da dum dum da 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 dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da da dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum da da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da da dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum da da dum dum da dum dum da da dum dum da dum dum da da dum 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 da dum dum da da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da da dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum da da dum dum da dum da dum dum da dum dum da da dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum da da dum dum da dum dum da da dum dum da dum dum da da dum dum dum